The NBA schedule has arrived. The problem spots, the national TV games, and everything you need to know about the Magic's 2026 schedule today on Locked On Magic.
You are Locked On Magic, your daily Orlando Magic podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are indeed Locked On Magic. Today is August 14th, 2025. It will be August 15th, 2025. My name is Phil Prosper-Reich. I'm the senior writer over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com, credentialed member of the Orlando Magic Media since the 2012 season. On today's episode of Locked On Magic, the 2026 schedule is here. We can all plan our lives until at least early April, probably planning to mid-May, maybe late May, maybe more. Why the Magic can make a statement at the start of the season, why the Magic got more national TV games, and all the odds and ends you need to know from the Orlando Magic's 2026 schedule. We're going to get to all that coming up here in just a moment. But first, we want to thank you again for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day, no matter when you listen to us, whether it's first thing in the morning, whether it's right when we upload. We truly appreciate you making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. We truly appreciate all of our Orlando Magic dailies who listen to Locked On Magic 5 days a week. Every single time we post a new episode, and somehow we are still going strong, even in the deadest parts of the offseason. It's all part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Magic is brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. The NBA schedule is officially out. We can all plan our lives until, again, early April. I tend to put everything on a hold in the fall until I know the schedule, until I know what days I have committed to doing things, to covering the Orlando Magic, to doing these podcasts. And yes, there will be a few games that I'll have to miss for some personal stuff and for some other job stuff as well. But we have 80 of the 82 games. Of course, 2 will be added on after the NBA Cup ends, or after the NBA Cup group play finishes. And we know the path ahead. The Orlando Magic will open the season October 22nd against and please brace yourself for the impact of this news. The Orlando Magic will open the season October 22nd at the Kia Center against the Miami Heat. We'll talk to our friends at Locked On Heat about that game, I am sure, here in the coming weeks, as we typically do, as we look ahead to that game. Otherwise, the Orlando Magic schedule, I found honestly very little that I am upset about. There are a few things that I'm a little bit leery of, but really, I think the only schedule loss that I saw was a back-to-back that ends in Cleveland, and Orlando to Cleveland back-to-back. Or I think it's just a one-off trip to Cleveland. I don't even know if it's a back-to-back, honestly. There is and I only know this because it's a road trip I'm thinking of going on. There is a Miami to Atlanta to Orlando to face Oklahoma City, with the Atlanta-Oklahoma City as a back-to-back. That's not crazy, but I don't like playing Oklahoma City on a back-to-back. We'll get to some of those odds and ends in a little bit. But I want to talk about the start of the season. The schedule to me is, I don't want to say bland. And again, we'll talk about some of these odds and ends here in a minute. But I found so little to get angry about, so little to get outraged about, that I honestly look at this schedule and I said to myself, there's a lot of opportunity here. And look, I'm a big believer. The schedule is roughly the same for everybody. You know, there are little things that are different. Again, we're going to get to those in a minute. But when I looked at this schedule, I was like, okay, to me, what's going to be important is how the Magic perform in the first quarter of the season. If the Magic can get off on the right foot through the first 21 games, October, November, 20 games, if the Magic can get off on the right foot, they can put themselves in a really good position to accomplish their goals. Now, obviously the big goal for the Orlando Magic is to win the championship. That's not going to be done during the regular season. You just set yourself up for that. And at the end of the day, we don't know how ready this team is going to be for that until they actually do it. It is the big criticism. It is the big concern. It's the big reason to pump the brakes on the hype train for the Orlando Magic. It's just the fact that In 2 playoff series, the Magic have not won a road playoff game, let alone won a playoff series. So this team has a lot to prove. And it's still a relatively new team. The Orlando Magic added a huge new player in Desmond Bane, a big deal new player. And so we have to see how all of these pieces connect and whether they click the way that we think. The Magic got off to a hot start last year, even with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope struggling. He looked like he was going to be a really fine fit, and obviously injuries derailed everything. The Magic need to get off to that kind of start again. And when I looked at the schedule and I looked at those first 20 games, I see an opportunity to do so. But I also see that it's not going to be easy. Honestly, the most important game that the Magic play in those first 20 games is not opening night against the Miami Heat, although that is obviously an opportunity to make a statement. Most important game is going to come Friday, game number 2, against the Atlanta Hawks, a team similar to Orlando that is trying to prove themselves, trying to take a step up, made big moves this offseason. A team that has at times given the Magic problems, although the Magic handled them pretty well last year, going 3-1 against them in the regular season and obviously winning the play-in tournament game. And then winning that big game, obviously, in late April as well. In all, you look at the start of the schedule, especially like these first 8 games, and it's a huge, huge deal. For the first time since the 2016 season, the Orlando Magic will open with consecutive home games. In fact, for the first time in franchise history, the Orlando Magic start with 3 straight home games. And you hope that you can defend the Kia Center. Remember, like last year, the big thing was Orlando started 10-0 at home. They looked unbeatable at the Kia Center. They were winning games like crazy before they lost. I think it was their first home loss was against Oklahoma City, and that was after Franz Wagner was out in December. Building and restoring the Kia Center is going to be a big part of success for Orlando. And so to start with 3 home games against a Miami team that should be pretty good, maybe not championship level good, but should be a challenging team, an Atlanta team that thinks they are as good as Orlando, and maybe they are. They'll have Jalen Johnson back for that game. They'll have Kristaps Porzingis. We don't know. And then against the Chicago Bulls, at minimum 2-1 is the goal, but 3-0 is realistic. Because then Orlando goes on the longest road trip of their season. That's right. The Orlando Magic take the longest road trip of their season. It isn't quite like going out west for game 2 like they did 2 years ago, but the Magic make the longest road trip of their season. At Philadelphia, at Detroit, at Charlotte, at Washington, and then closing with a big game on national television, the Magic's first of 14 nationally televised games. We'll talk about that in a minute, at Atlanta on November 4th. Now you look at that road trip, and Atlanta obviously is a playoff caliber team. Detroit's a playoff caliber team. Those are really the only 2 tried and true, 100% everyone agrees these are playoff teams the Magic will face on that road trip. Now, I think Philadelphia is going to be tougher than people give them credit for. If Joel Embiid's healthy, they are still a very formidable opponent. And of course, Joel Embiid's not going to be playing in back-to-backs this year, so that may play a factor in things as well, in what we'll talk about in a minute. But I think Philadelphia, Philadelphia is not the team you want to play early in the season. You want to play them later in the season when injuries have started to hit them hard. They'll have Jared McCain. They'll have Tyrese Maxey. They'll have Paul George while he's potentially still engaged. And so if there's one thing that's challenging about these first 20 games is Orlando has 2 games against Philadelphia, 3 games against Boston. They'll play Boston in a home-and-home, including their NBA Cup game on November 7th and November 9th. And then they'll go to Boston on November 23rd as part of a little 3-game road trip over Thanksgiving at Boston, at Philadelphia, at Detroit, the last 2 being NBA Cup games. Boston, too, another team that I don't want to play early before maybe injuries hit, while they're still feeling confident that, hey, and defiant that, hey, we're not, just because we don't have Tatum doesn't mean we're going away. In all, over the course of the first 20 games, Orlando plays 11 teams that made the playoffs last year. That does not include the 2 games against Atlanta, because Atlanta did not make the playoffs last year. They lost in the play-in tournament. That does not include those 2 games against Philadelphia. In fact, Orlando will play 6 games against teams that were top top 4 in their conference over the first 20 games. 3 are against Boston. So 3 of the 4 games against Boston. The last game against Boston is on the last game of the season, so we don't really count that. 3 of the Magic's 4 games against Boston will come within the first month of the season. They are this year's Indiana Pacers, so maybe Paolo will score 50 against them. They get 2 games against the New York Knicks at New York on November 12th, a game that will air on ESPN, and November 22nd in Orlando. Before going back-to-back to Boston on November 23rd. Again, we're going to talk about back-to-backs here in a minute. And then they get Detroit, and then they get the Houston Rockets on November 16th. And obviously, they'll also play at Detroit twice in this time span as well. They also have the Golden State Warriors, the LA Clippers over these first 20 games. The Magic don't need to race out way into the lead here. You know, the schedule evens out in the end, and then we'll get to some odds and ends on that in a minute. But the Magic have the chance over the first 20 games. If they can get 12, 13, 14 wins, go 14-6 over their first 20 games, that is a statement of, we are here. We have arrived, and we are ready to accomplish all of our goals. So that's just the first 20 games. That's just what we're looking forward to in the first 20 games. Let's talk about the odds and ends of the schedule, national TV games, back-to-backs, where the road trips are. We're going to get to that coming up here in just a moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Magic is brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. If you have a ton of subscriptions or you just don't know what is this thing I'm paying for, Monarch helps you immediately spot subscriptions you aren't using, and canceling them alone can save you money every single month. Don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNBA. So I've obviously made a big deal of this. So let's cut through the tape here. The Orlando Magic are on national TV a lot more this year than they were last year. Like, that's good news. I think that's ultimately a good thing. I think that's what we expected. You know, the Magic had 5 national TV games when they started last season. I've seen some people want to throw out the Amazon Prime games and throw out the Peacock games. Orlando has 6 on ESPN and NBC. They'll have, if you throw in the Amazon Prime games, they are at 10. And yes, I am going to count the Peacock games. They're at 14 if you include the Peacock exclusive games. Now, some people, again, want to say that's the new NBA TV. I don't think that's the case. There are some very good games on Peacock. And again, I think NBC is going to give those Peacock games, like, it is an NBA TV where they're just taking the local broadcast. NBC is going to send people to these games. I think part of the reason why we downgraded NBA TV games on the old TV deal is because NBA TV didn't have their own specialized broadcast. They just rebroadcast, or they added a local broadcast to that team. And then they got better at that. So, you know, maybe we should have been a little kinder to NBA TV. Regardless, if we're going to count all the games as it is, Orlando has 14 national TV games coming up this season. That is 6th. That is 6th among Eastern Conference teams. Again, I expected this. The Boston Celtics probably on national TV more than they should be. The New York Knicks lead the Eastern Conference. The Cavs actually are 1 fewer than the Celtics, which is a little surprising to me. The Bucks get their share. It's Giannis. I understand that. The Detroit Pistons have 16. I'm not going to argue so much about that. I expected that the Magic and the Pistons would have about the same. Pistons were better last year. I'm fine with them getting a few more than Orlando. Orlando finished 7th in the standings last year. They're expected to finish 3rd or 4th, but they finished 7th in the standings last year. To be 6th and to see Miami get downgraded so much, it's a big thing. Now, who the Magic are playing and the opportunities to showcase this team are also very different. There's no Oklahoma City. The Magic aren't playing the Thunder on national TV. 3 of their 4 games against the Atlanta Hawks this season will be on national TV. I mentioned that the first national TV game of the season for the Orlando Magic will be November 4th, Tuesday, 8 o'clock on NBC. The Magic will also play the Hawks on, let me just scan here real fast and find it. They'll play March 16th in Atlanta on Peacock, and then they'll close their final national TV appearance April 1st, April Fool's Day, on ESPN against the Atlanta Hawks. Additionally, 3 of the Orlando Magic's 4 games against the Cleveland Cavaliers will also be on national TV. That's January 26th at Cleveland on Peacock, March 11th, that's a Wednesday, on ESPN in Orlando, and March 24th in Cleveland on NBC, as well as on Peacock. Games will be streamed on both. The Orlando Magic are on national TV a lot more. And there's even some fun matchups. So they'll get an Amazon Prime like Sunday afternoon game against the Minnesota Timberwolves. There is a game against the Houston Rockets. Let me get these games. February 26th against Houston Rockets at 7:30. March 7th in Minnesota. That's a Saturday afternoon on Prime. Those are two of the Magic's three prime games. The other being actually 2 of the Magic's 4 prime games. The other 2 being the 2 games in Europe. They'll play the Memphis Grizzlies January 15th in Berlin. That'll be on Amazon Prime, as well as January 18th in London. That will also be on Amazon Prime. So I'm satisfied. Maybe I'm a little too obsessed with the whole national TV thing. And again, there is, I think, a lot of options. There essentially the way the schedule works, there is a national TV window every single day of the week. And so if there's a team that's really bad or you want to change the national TV game, there's the opportunity to do so. And so I think the Magic are a team that is ripe to get more national TV games as the season progresses. In fact, one thing that I really do like about the national TV schedule, and again, this is something I care about because I'm in a small market, I think the fewest national TV games any team gets is 6. I think are 4 or 6 or something like that. So that I think is a really nice touch. And so again, there are going to be opportunities for the Magic to sneak on to national TV a little bit more. I'm very, very satisfied that Orlando is going to get a significant number of national TV games. Again, some significantly big ones. I think that the game on NBC against the Philadelphia 76ers in the NBA Cup, that again, the Sixers, I don't know what to make of them quite yet, but I think that is going to be a huge opportunity for Orlando. I think that is going to be a chance on a national stage to showcase who the Magic are on NBC, to showcase this is who we are going up against a good team. In fact, the fact that 2 of the Magic's first 3 national TV appearances feel very winnable. At Atlanta, yeah, that'll be the end of that 5-game road trip, and I think that end of road trip games are very tricky, as always. That's a winnable game for Orlando. They should feel confident they can beat the Hawks. November 12th in New York, 7 o'clock on ESPN, that's going to be an opportunity for the Magic to show very early in the season, like, hey, consider us contenders. We're putting our name in the hat. They don't play the Cavs until January 24th. But the Magic are going to put their name in the hat in that game against the Knicks. And then an NBA Cup game at Philadelphia. Again, a chance to advance into the NBA Cup, advance to the knockout rounds once again, hopefully get a home game in those knockout rounds. That is an opportunity for the Magic to win a game with a national showcase. So by the time we get to December, again, those first 20 games, the Magic will have been on national TV 3 times and hopefully 2-1, hopefully able to stack some wins and build a reputation nationally as a team to watch out for, as a team to care about. Now, again, I think a lot of the national TV conversation has a lot to do with how NBC and Amazon are going to present the NBA. We know what ESPN is going to do. I am not a fan of ESPN's coverage, but I'm really intrigued. I feel like NBC is going to make these games feel really big. We do know that Basketball Night in America is coming on Sundays in February after the NFL season ends. They're going to kind of extend the NFL brand to the NBA, and I think NBC is going to present the NBA as this huge deal, just like they did in the 90s. And so I'm really excited to see that. And again, the Magic have 3 NBC games. They have 4 Peacock games coming up. Um, they're going to be on NBC. And again, that first Peacock game is December 1st against the Chicago Bulls. Chicago Bulls aren't a good team, but they feel confident that they can sell that game and sell Peacock subscriptions for early December by putting them against the Magic. That is a Magic showcase game for whoever is on Peacock and whoever's watching at the time. And I believe that is Peacock exclusive. I don't believe that game will be on FanDuel. The FanDuel schedule not out yet. The Magic will be back on FanDuel Sports Florida, but that schedule is not out yet. That'll come closer to the season. I think this is I think it's really, really exciting. I think it is a good thing. Again, this may be something only I care about. At the end of the day, you win basketball games, you're going to get the attention you deserve. I think that the Magic clearly got more attention in this national TV schedule that came out. And so I think that's going to ultimately be a good thing for the Magic. There are plenty more odds and ends to talk about on the schedule. I mentioned one of them, that long road trip after the opening homestand. There's another interesting road trip and homestand combo that I want to talk about. Plus, we'll talk about rest days, back-to-backs, and some more odds and ends. We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. So let's talk back-to-backs. I mentioned this when the European games were announced, because the Orlando Magic are going to Berlin and London on January 15th. They'll be in Berlin. January 18th in London. I expected both those games would be on national TV. They're both on national TV, both Amazon Prime games. Very, very excited to see the presentation for those games. NBA wants to feature those games. It's important to them. And again, because the Magic are playing in Berlin, they got the Wagner brothers. I assume Mo Wagner will be healthy for that game. It's going to be that broadcast is going to be very Magic centric and very Magic centered, because they are they are a big part of the story they're going to tell. But because of that trip, I was expecting a very cramped schedule. I was expecting, like I mentioned this, our friends in Cleveland and a friend of mine, someone who was on the Indiana trip with me at the end of the season, we were talking to the Pacers reporters, and they were talking about how they had to change some things and tweak some things after their trip to Paris last year. I was expecting the Magic to pay a tax. And that tax is they have fewer days to put their games. And so they're going to be scrunched up. And so I thought that would come in the form of back-to-backs. Orlando lucked out. Orlando plays only 14 back-to-backs this year. That is, the fewest in the league is 12. The most in the league is 16. So they're right in the middle. That was shocking to me. If I counted correctly, 5 or 6 of them are after the Europe trip. So I think the Magic are going to pay that tax a little bit earlier. However, on top of that, of the 14 back-to-backs, 5 are my favorite kind of back-to-backs. I am a big fan of home back-to-backs. I think the NBA, if the NBA is going to do back-to-backs, and I think they're not completely unavoidable on the road, but if the NBA is going to insist that they're doing back-to-backs, home back-to-backs are my favorite. Like, give me an excess of home back-to-backs. So the fact that nearly half of the Magic's back-to-backs are home back-to-backs, sign me up. Again, like, usually as the schedule comes out and they're like things I'm just like, I don't like that. That game doesn't feel right to me. This is going to be a schedule loss. When I put the schedule in my calendar, I found very few of those. Like, I found very few games where I'm just like, I don't like this. I don't like that back-to-back. I don't like this thing that's happening. The only schedule loss that I was like, or the only back-to-back that I was just like, I don't like this. And a lot of these back-to-backs are going to ruin my plans to go on road trips, but because I don't trust travel on back-to-backs. But the only back-to-back that I was just like, I don't like this, March 23rd, March 24th. March 23rd, home versus Indiana. March 24th at Cleveland. And that game is on national TV on NBC. So I'm not thrilled about that. But a lot of home back-to-backs, which I can live with. Now, March is going to be the tricky month. I mentioned those first 20 games. Those first 20 games are going to be a little bit prove-it. Orlando should still come out okay. Like, they may be 12-8 or 13-7, maybe even 11-9. I think 11-9 we'd be a little worried. They're going to be fine getting through those first 20 games. It's just a matter of degrees. Are they, they're serious, they're here, they're ready, or it's like, okay, they're still figuring some things out. We see the vision, but it's not quite come together yet. March is going to be a tricky month. In March, Orlando will play, let's see if I kick out this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 back-to-backs in the month of March, including a 4 in 5 days, which shouldn't be so tricky. That a 4 in 5 days that includes an afternoon Amazon Prime game on Saturday, March 7th in Minnesota, followed by a quick trip to Milwaukee, 8 o'clock game against the Bucks, so more than 24 hours between tip-off. But more than 24 hours between tip-off, relatively short trip. It's, a puddle hop of a flight, 5-hour drive. I looked it up. That's a road trip I'm considering going on. Going back to my old stomping grounds in Minneapolis, followed by a March 11th game at home against Cleveland, March 12th at home against Washington, followed by at Miami on March 14th, March 16th at Atlanta, March 17th at home versus Oklahoma City. I don't really think the Magic necessarily pay a heavy tax for their long international road trip or the 2 international games, but March is going to be the tricky month. March is going to be where their legs may get them because they're playing a lot of games in March. If I'm looking at this correctly, let me see if I can find the actual stats here. In March, the Magic play 17 games in March, 10 home, 7 away. So at least most of them are home, but 17 games in March. That is a lot. That is more games than any month in the calendar year. And so again, Orlando has to make up some of these games. That's just the nature of the beast. They have to make up some of these games. And that's where they're going to make up them. Now, that's where they're also going to get a lot of home games. On that note, we have become pretty used to the Orlando Magic having a long homestand, typically around Christmas, if not in March. If you remember 2019, the Magic used a long homestand to get themselves right and make the playoffs and clinch that playoff spot, that breakthrough playoff spot. And 2024, Orlando had a really long homestand as well that I think they went 5-0 in or 5-1 in, that really cemented their place in the Eastern Conference. Last year, they had a 7-game homestand that they went 1-6 on and was a complete disaster. This year, the longest homestand of the season is only 4 games. So that might be the cost of the international trip is, they're not going to stretch the Magic out with a lot of travel, but Orlando does a lot of these little quick trips, like 2-game trips, 1 game out, one game back. They have a lot of homestands that are just like 2 here, 2 at home, 2 on the road, 2 at home, 2 on the road, stuff like that. That homestand is in a very interesting spot in the schedule. And I'm actually really intrigued to see how the Magic react to this. One of the more interesting parts of the schedule, the Orlando Magic in February will have a 4-game homestand, season-long 4-game homestand, February 5th against Brooklyn, February 7th against Utah, 2 very winnable games, February 9th against Milwaukee, February 11th against Milwaukee. Very winnable games. That should honestly be a 3-1 homestand. Then they hit the All-Star break. Get to chill for the All-Star break in Los Angeles. Then they immediately go out west for a 4-game road trip. And again, a fairly manageable road trip at Sacramento, at Phoenix, at the Clippers, at the Lakers. They then come home for another 4-game homestand versus Houston, versus Detroit, versus Washington, versus Dallas. That's February 26th versus Houston, March 1st versus Detroit, March 3rd versus Washington, March 5th versus Dallas. Again, feels very manageable. Over the course of those 12 games, I said 3-1 on that homestand, go 2-2. So you're 5-3, go another 2-2. They can go 7-5, 8-4 of those 12 games and really, really do some damage and gain some distance. And again, keep picking up steam. So having that all around the All-Star break, I think is really, really interesting. The other interesting road trip, and I want to get to some more back-to-back stuff here in a minute. The other interesting little road trip is so Orlando always takes 2 West Coast road trips. So usually 4 games out west. They don't do any of that stupid, we're stopping in San Antonio on our way east or stopping in Indiana on our way east. I despise that. I'm glad that's not in the schedule. But Orlando usually takes 2 4-game West Coast road trips to take care of all the Pacific and Mountain time zone teams. And so the second one happens right after the All-Star break. So, come back from the All-Star break. Paolo and Franz might as well just stay in Los Angeles for All-Star weekend. They'll come back to Orlando. They'll get their practice. They'll get that one practice in. They'll hop on a plane to Sacramento, and they'll start that road trip. The other road trip comes in December. It usually does. December 18th at Denver, December 20th at Utah, December 22nd at Golden State, December 23rd at Portland. Again, very fairly manageable road trip. That road trip is after the NBA Cup games. So if the Orlando Magic make the NBA Cup final, if they make the NBA Cup semifinals, they are probably packing for the entire week. They're probably 2 weeks out on the road. That becomes the longest road trip of the season because the semifinals will be in Vegas, the finals will be in Vegas, and there's no reason to come home. One of the complaints that like the Oklahoma City Thunder had, that the Milwaukee Bucks had, is that like OKC last year came from like Dallas or came from home to fly to Vegas. They played those 2 games in Vegas, and then they flew straight to Orlando. Now, they beat the Magic that night, but they weren't super happy about the mileage that they had to take on. And Milwaukee had some of the same issue. Milwaukee ended up winning the NBA Cup. The Magic, like, they'll complain. And if they win the NBA Cup, I'll go ahead and mark that at Portland game as a schedule loss. Portland's a tough team. I think they'll be better than people think. But that becomes a 6-game road trip if Orlando wins the NBA Cup. But at least they're already out west. At least they don't have to like come home and then fly back out. They'll just stay there because the NBA Cup final is December 16th. So flying from Vegas to Denver, not a huge deal. You just don't have time to celebrate that you won a trophy. Now, I want to get to the back-to-back points. So there are 2 sides of the coin in back-to-backs. There's sides where you're at a rest disadvantage and sides where you're at a rest advantage. Again, one of the worries is that because Orlando has to go to Europe, they're going to always be at a disadvantage. Orlando this year actually breaks about even. Orlando has 14 back-to-backs. They will play teams on the second night of a back-to-back 13 times. So about even. So no loss there. Our friends at Positive Residual, again, just not a lot of data to go on quite yet. But looking at rest advantage, looking at, home rest advantage versus road rest advantage, and I think this is where all those home back-to-backs help. The Magic have the 6th easiest schedule in the league. Now, again, what does that actually mean? Who knows? Philadelphia could be a lot better than we think. Boston could be a lot better than we think. There's going to be a surprise that just throws a wrench in all this. Orlando is probably a lot better than those models think. But the point is this. There's not a lot to be upset in this schedule. Everything breaks about even. There's no thing that's like a huge opportunity or a huge advantage that the Magic must take advantage of, like that 7-game homestand that they did last year, that really flipped their season. Like that was a huge turning point in their season. And obviously they responded to it, but if they'd taken care of their business on that homestand, we're talking about the team being the 5 or the 6 seed instead of the 7 seed. There's nothing that's just so egregiously bad and frustrating within this schedule. And I think that's ultimately a good thing. I think that ultimately means the path is there for the Magic to accomplish all their goals. Like I mentioned, I think those first 20 games, if I picked a quarter of the season where we're going to learn a lot, obviously, in the first 20 games. That just goes without saying. But if I had to pick one moment or one thing that stood out to me as I was putting the schedule in my calendar, it was those first 20 games are really going to tell us how ready this team is and how much of a step that they're ready to take. It is going to be a fun season. I've run into a few players over the summer. I've talked to a few of them, and everybody is very, very excited about what's coming this season for the Magic. We have this roadmap laid out, and now we just have to wait the next month before the Magic take the court and return for this crazy, crazy season. But that's going to do it for me today. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. You can, of course, find me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD and on Blue Sky at PhilipRR. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Himalaya, Google Play, Spotify, Odyssey, and all the fun places to download podcasts to your podcast-enabled listening device. For the latest on the Orlando Magic, you can also check us out on YouTube. You can also check us out on YouTube. Just search for Locked On Magic. For the latest on the Orlando Magic, be sure to check out OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can find us on Twitter at OMagicDaily. And for even more Orlando Magic content, be sure to check out our Patreon page, my Patreon page, the Orlando Magic Hub at patreon.com/Orlando Magic Hub. Once I am done recording this, I'll be writing my 5 most important games of the season. We'll probably talk about those a little bit next week. I also have that Jalen Suggs episode queued up. I promise we will get to that We got some DBB Super Cup. We got some German basketball to talk about as well on Monday. So a lot still to get to. As always, that's patreon.com/Orlando Magic Hub. As always, thank you for your support. Now that you're done making Locked On Magic your first listen of the day, go make Locked On NBA your next listen, because there's no offseason with a new schedule. Locked On NBA is breaking down the schedule from the national perspective, the games they are looking forward to seeing, the stories they are looking forward to reading, to watching and hearing about. Doug, Matt, and Hayes keep you up to date on everything going on around the NBA this summer. Find Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. All part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That's going to do it for me today, though. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic for Orlando Magic Daily and Locked On Magic. This has been Philip Rossman. Have a great weekend. We will see you all again Sunday afternoon, Monday morning, whenever you listen. Talk about some German basketball. Talk about Jalen Suggs. Plenty more schedule stuff to dive into. Plus, it's time to start talking to some other people about this season. We'll get to all that the rest of this offseason here on Locked On Magic. Until then, for Orlando Magic Daily and Locked On Magic, this has been Philip Rossman. We'll see you all again next time for another episode of Locked On Magic.